Howdy, y'all. Welcome to Howdy Partner. I'm David Daniels, Partner Solutions Architect with AWS. And with me today, I have Mohamed. How you doing, Mohamed?
Good, man. How you doing, Devin? How you doing?
I'm doing awesome.
Awesome.
Want to tell everyone where you're at today? We're in two separate places, aren't we?
Yeah. I'm tuning in from Seattle today, HQ. So this is my home and been here ever since. So look forward to the show today.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm out here in lovely Firestone, Colorado. So just about 30 miles north of Denver or so. Just moved here recently, so yay.
Awesome.
Yeah, go ahead and everybody let us know in the chat where you're tuning in from. We'd like to see where y'all coming from. Howdy Partner is often watched worldwide. We love seeing that. So Howdy Partner is our weekly show that we do on Twitch where we introduce AWS partners and show you guys some of the cool solutions that they're building and give you a little bit of insight, some demos, and let you view things that maybe you can go play around with later. So anyway, today we have a special guest joining us, actually. I'm really excited to introduce Adrian SanMiguel to us. So how you doing, Adrian?
Hey, y'all. How are we doing today?
Doing awesome. Doing awesome.
Good deal. Good deal. Never been out to your neck of the woods. I spent a lot of time out in Colorado Springs. Make my way to Denver every once in a while, but I hear good things about Firestone. Certainly a lot better things than what's going on in Austin today. It's been about 60 degrees all week, and it's supposed to be a balmy 93 up to 97 through Saturday. So not looking forward to going back to summer 3, and definitely holding out hope for a colder climate eventually at some point.
Yeah, I think we're on summer 3 right now. So.
Yeah, I love it. It's definitely the third act, and certainly keeps us on our toes out this way, especially when we get a chance to go outside and enjoy the fresh air when we're not working with partners and trying to help them solve some pretty cool problems along the way.
Yeah, awesome. I was actually going to blow out my sprinkler system last week because we had our first freeze, and then all of a sudden it's hot again. So, fun time of year. But
yeah, sure.
Adrian, so who are we going to be talking to today?
We're talking to my friends over at Innovative Solutions. They are a premier tier consultant partner out of Rochester, New York. And fun fact about these guys, I was assigned to them way back in 2018 as a bit of a ad hoc engagement with them. In a former life, I was what we call a partner management solutions architect, and that's effectively the SAs, much like ourselves, that are deeply vested and gold in the growth and development of their partners. And now they have to go in and do an evaluation in the managed services practice. And since then, we kept touch over the years, and eventually in my current role as a enterprise architect in our strategic partnership and governance group here at AWS. I'm effectively the schemer, as we like to put it, the individual that's in charge of the grand scheme of things, the big picture, to help effectively design that roadmap of how we get from a level of sophistication maturation and go up the scale and just force multiply to get to a certain revenue target, solutions, or market disruptor. And in our first meeting with them, had a really in-depth conversation of all places, sitting at a bar waiting to go have dinner. And SVP of product there, Travis Rehl, said, "Hey man, I got this crazy idea. Where I want to leverage generative AI in a cool way to actually go through and munge customer data and see what we can find out of it, and kind of march towards a solution to problems that individual customers have, instead of trying to take broad strokes and have a generic solution for everybody." And at the time, I remember being my usual charming and sarcastic self and said, "All right, yeah, it sounds cool, but let's take it off the back of the cocktail napkin. Let's make this reality. Let's work about these. Let's work about it in the way that, show me something that you got. Let's work through it. Let's figure out how we can make this scale grow better, and we can take it from there." And then I get approached a couple months ago and say, "Hey, man, remember that thing? We did it. We went through and we figured out how to best do it. We went on our own and leveraged our existing partnerships to build something interesting and compelling. We'd love to show it to you." And that's what brings us here today. They're going to do a bit of show and tell for a product that they've dubbed Tailwinds. It's catching fire at this point, and there's a lot I would love to say, but I don't want to steal their thunder.
Awesome. Yeah, it's very exciting. Gen AI is just it's a hot topic right now. A lot of excitement around it. So I think instead of keeping everyone waiting, we'll go ahead and bring our friends on from Innovative Solutions. So
Awesome.
welcome to the show, Travis and Michael. If you want to just tell everyone who you are and introduce yourselves.
Sure. Hey, everybody. We have to take a pause, though. Schemer?
Schemer.
That's like you gave yourself your own title?
I give myself my own title, and I scheme that title, and I use it very lovingly. And we have to see. There's a random Naruto quote in here, like Akashi used to say. You have to see the question within the question. You have to be able to see beyond what the initial vision or the plan is, and help guide people, almost Sherpa-like, to get to the end result that they don't know that they want to get to, but everybody's kind of talking about it at the same time.
I'm interested that you chose that word, but all right.
It's the best word to describe it.
Fair enough. But hi, everybody. I'm Travis Rehl. I run product and engineering for Innovative, but my background is really in big data, ISV, SaaS applications. I've been working in AWS specifically, I don't know, probably feels like 10 years. It probably is 10 years at this point. Back when it was like, queues and S3 buckets, and pretty much that's about it. But more importantly, I had my own NLP startup at one point as well, but I exited and got into a lot around AI. And when GenAI and really GPT-2 really reared its head, a year and a half ago, whatever it is, got really excited. And we did a lot in the last, I guess now 6 to 9 months. That Mike and I are super proud of, but also seeing some really cool use cases and some fun stuff that we've been able to build for customers. But Mike, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yep. Thanks, guys. Nice to meet everybody. I am Mike Krauklis. I'm the chief architect here at Innovative. I've been here for, I think it's a little over 5 years now. I have a background in like enterprise solution architecture and software development, focusing on productionizing R&D developed AI and ML systems and really taking those into full scale using operationalizable technologies. So taking something that research and development team has built and turning it into reality in a production system. So like Travis said, we've been kind of on this ML journey for quite a while now, but really the last 6 to 9 months focusing on generative AI and some of the capabilities, and really seeing some exciting things, some exciting use cases and opportunities. It seems to be an endless thing of an endless list of opportunities and different ways that the technology can be leveraged. So we're really excited to kind of show you what we've done so far, and kind of the direction that things seem to be headed in.
We're also based out of Rochester, New York, which is not a very populated place, and it's like 50 or 45 degrees out for the last week, which is wonderful, by the way. And we have the immense pleasure of Mike and I working together, literally side by side on many days, not all. But at the same time, it makes it super easy to noodle on ideas and to think about, like, we meet a customer and they say something, we say, that doesn't sound like a good idea. And we can figure out how can we solve or improve or change it. So like I said, super excited to talk to you guys about what we've done and what we've seen, some crazy concepts even that are coming out, some more basic things that we're seeing that are rinse or repeatable. As Adrian described, we've built our own architecture around this. We've made partnerships with core companies like Weaviate, which are an open source vector database company. Lots of time, different types of models from the spectrum, whether it's Cohere, Anthropic, even OpenAI, now Titan, and so forth. So we could talk about a lot of stuff and just noodle.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks guys for joining us, and welcome. Feel free, everyone in the chat, to ask your questions. Throw your questions in. We'd be happy to get to them. So, but yeah, I have a couple of questions for you guys. I was curious. So, with your architecture, what are the main underlying AWS services that you guys are leveraging right now?
Yeah. So Mike can describe that, but real quickly, I think it's important to note why the architecture is the way it is. And so 6 months ago, give or take, we were building out, Mike and I were building out a number of internal tools for ourselves, really to help our sales team, quite honestly, to make their lives easier, or from an engineer's perspective, get more detail on certain things. And we sat there, and every single time we built a tool, we realized we built the same tool over and over and over again. And we said, okay, this seems like a thing. And we started testing it with some customers with some ideas. And we realized that we think 80% of the time, it's going to be a very similar, if not same architecture, which led us to the actual services that Mike can walk through.
Sure, and we'll be bringing up an architecture diagram a little bit later, and we'll get into the nitty gritty. But the long and short of it is, wherever we can, we've leveraged serverless technologies to try and minimize the ongoing costs for a system that, as customers are trying it out, they may have big spikes in usage. And then they may not use it for a couple of days because they're really kind of kicking their wheels. They've got people coming in, trying it out, and then going and doing something else for a period of time. So really focusing on technologies that can scale well, that can handle spikes in traffic, and that have minimal costs when they're not being used. So we're talking API gateway, Lambda, SQS, all the good AWS serverless managed technologies.
If I may, isn't that a little counterintuitive, counterproductive for a managed service provider like yourself to say, hey, we're going to go all in on fully managed services that are scalable, serverless, and really intuitive? Wouldn't you kind of want to make it as complicated as possible, make that perfect mousetrap so that inextricably your customer has to lean on you to do the thing? It's a curious decision you made there.
I think the honest answer is no matter what we do, it's going to feel complicated to a customer.
Okay.
So why not make it easier for ourselves? Whether that's a literal box that's running some scripts, or it's just deployed on a Python script and a Lambda function, or whatever it's going to be. They typically don't know or want to edit or have a team that can help them. Yeah. So we prefer to build it in a way that's easier for us, to be honest with you. The other thing that we've learned, especially in the GenAI space, people can write Python functions all day. That's not groundbreaking. They really struggle right now on leveraging data manipulation, data massaging, prompt engineering quite a bit, model selection. And so while we're choosing Lambda, choosing Bedrock in many cases now as well, that doesn't mean it's any less complex.
Yeah, so it seems like you're definitely taking some advice that someone I gave years ago in going further up stack. Anybody can just go and drop in some EC2 instances or potentially put in some Lambda functions and drop in the Python and say, well, blackjack dealer style, wipe your hands and walk away and say, all right, this is your mess. Let us know if it breaks. You're going the step further to make it as fall down easy as possible.
Yeah, we haven't, I don't know, Mike, I don't think we've ran into any streaming issues with Lambda to date, even when making LLM calls, right? That would constitute us to talk about going to a container or going to a box itself, right?
I think
Usually,
generally speaking, we do have some potential architectures that are leveraging some containers really due to the timeout of Lambda. If we have a long-running batch process, sometimes we scope some things out where we want a container doing some of the work so that it can maintain all of the context while it's working on it. But most of it is going to be Lambda serverless. We're breaking that work apart where we can and orchestrating it with step functions and SQS queues and whatnot. But every once in a while, you do see something, a use case where it needs to be more long running.
Yeah. So we built this, this architecture. Mike, if maybe we wanted to skip to the image of it, we could throw it up real quick just so people can see it.
Sure.
So we started from this architecture simply because it was the same architecture we were building for ourselves internally, over and over and over again. This is it here. And this, essentially, I'll just walk you through it really quickly. Essentially what we're doing at the top is we're consuming content typically from an existing data store or data lake a customer may have. We're pre-forming it into a format that we've pre-configured for ourselves. And then that's steps 1 through 4, essentially. And then from step 4 down to step 6, which is where the Lambda function inserts content into the Weaviate vector store. So I'll explain that in a second. We are doing things like generating vector embeddings and then inserting that content dynamically into the vectors database. And we're using Amazon Titan actually embeddings for that as well now. So we're trying to keep a lot of this, within the bounding box of a customer's environment, quite frankly. The vector store, in the selection of that vector store, is actually I think pretty important, right, to a lot of the conversations we're having. A lot of people are talking to us about, hey, can you use like PG Vector or OpenSearch or something else? And they're fine solutions. What we're finding is that, especially early on this customer lifecycle, is that we need something that has a lot of open source community plugins and support that we can fiddle and try and deploy things really fast. And we liked Weaviate in particular for two reasons. One is they have a huge community. They've got a ton of out-of-the-box connectors to models like Cohere and Anthropic and so forth, right? So it makes it super easy to try things and change things. They also solve for things like hybrid search and for typical semantic search in a really neat way compared to something like an OpenSearch would. So that's deployed on an EKS cluster. And then we leverage that through our Lambda function at the bottom to retrieve content dynamically to submit it to Bedrock. And in this scenario, we're submitting Anthropic Claude on this diagram, but it can work with Cohere or Titan or AI21 Labs or whatever. I think the thing that makes probably the biggest difference between this and, which is RAG, by the way, this is retrieval augmented generation RAG. It's totally normal. The difference is this is not for a chatbot. It could be used for a chatbot. We don't do a ton of chatbot work. That's like not our flavor. We're doing a ton of business automation. So things like I have rules and the rules need to be executed a particular way, or there's only certain types of rules under certain circumstances need to be used. Well, we're storing that kind of information inside of the vector database. And so as requests come in, we can dynamically pull the right rules or the right processes or whatever. And then we can dynamically make requests to, Anthropic or other models, right, depending on the use case, to perform the action at the end of the day. So we're seeing a ton of use cases as a result of that, right, that follow a traditional RAG motion that are not chatbot solutions. So I'm going to pause, though. Hopefully I didn't lose people in the explanation.
That's awesome. This is I love looking at architecture diagrams. So yeah, it's cool seeing what you've got going on here, and I'm excited to hear about some of these use cases. I'm sure we'll get to it, but yeah, sounds really cool.
I think the thing that stands out for me personally, I've been grokking architecture for 12, 13 years at this point. Looking at cloud or anything that remotely looks like cloud, and that's a firm shot and look at OpenStack and all its machinations over the years. What stands out to me is the simplicity of the architecture. Yeah, there's actually some really complex things happening behind the scenes, but this is something that any business decision maker can actually look at and understand and be walked through to determine how data set living in S3 is going to be munged, processed, decisions made, recommendations made, spit out an output, and actually have some sort of tangible outcome to tie it to, as opposed to kind of putting a quarter in the marble drop machine or the gumball machine and watching it spin down. It's almost the exact same thing. You give it the value and you're going to see something spit out relatively quickly. You don't need to understand underneath the hood how it works. You just need to understand that in a couple of seconds, minutes, as it were, you're going to get that output spit out. And that's ultimately what these business decision owners want. They want to focus on the outcome versus all the components that make up the spaghetti on the back end.
So maybe I should take a second and describe semantic search. And then Mike, curiously, maybe it's interesting if we describe how we are partitioning data at the bucket tier to then insert into the index of Weaviate. But really quickly on a semantic search. So semantic search, for people who are unfamiliar, it's the act of essentially natural language search. It's where you take a sentence, like, I like ice cream. I'm hungry for ice cream. That's a real thing. I like ice cream, right? And that may mean you want to return maybe a product portfolio or you're an e-commerce website, right, as an example. And you want to return all the most related pieces of products or content or whatever, documents, doesn't really matter, it could be images even, that most semantically are similar to the query or request or I like ice cream. But you say that, and what it does is it creates an embedding. And an embedding looks like GPS coordinates. That's a good way of thinking about it, right? So that sentence is a GPS coordinate. And inside the Weaviate database, we've got products, ice cream products, and each of those are their own GPS coordinates. And when we make the request, it then plots on a three-dimensional space. Where is my coordinate? And then it finds the most other related pieces of product content that have the most similar semantically pieces of information. And that's what's returned, and that's converted back into text, and that's how you get your, here's my 6 things of ice cream, whatever it is, right? So that's semantic search, and it's super powerful for, in a traditional chatbot experience, people are probably more used to. It's going to be things like returning HR documents. He said, what's my PTO policy? He goes and finds a document, finds the paragraph, and returns that piece of information. That's like the classic example that typically people use. In our scenario, we're doing things like looking up codes, looking up things like different types of business rules or outcomes or justification criteria, or even sometimes code that needs to be executed in different types of ways. Explain all that means. And that's all stored inside of Weaviate, and it's procured dynamically. One of the cool things we did in this architecture that I'll hand to Mike is around when we store data inside of Weaviate and how we're dynamically inserting that content into it. But Mike can explain, because I really, this is near the tip of where I understand even myself.
Sure. So what we see here is from our perspective, just a piece of the puzzle. So this is our what we call our Tailwinds on-ramp solution. We also have other pluggable solutions that interact with this. So on the front end, you see up in the top left, we're ingesting Parquet files. Well, Parquet, especially for some of our less sophisticated customers, isn't something that they're going to have at the ready already. So the question is, how do we get that into Parquet? We have another solution, a data lake solution that can get customers started. You can drop files that aren't Parquet, and it's going to automatically infer a schema from these files, like a CSV file or an Excel file. It will figure out the data types. It'll figure out all of the, the column names and everything, and then it will convert that into Parquet, and it'll organize it within a data lake for you. So that can be sitting upstream of this, or it could be an existing data lake or some other place where a customer may have Parquet already. But ultimately, this is expecting that the content gets into that Parquet format. Now, the way that we structure it within our S3 buckets, as we're talking about either the upstream data lake process or the bucket that you see here, would be that each folder within the S3 bucket is expected to be logically a table. That ultimately in the data lake becomes a table in the Glue data catalog. And that's going to be what we would consider a table, or kind of externally, we call it a knowledge domain or a domain in our Weaviate cluster. You could think of that as its own index, an index meaning that it has to have a common schema, it has to have common columns and data types and whatnot, and all has to be indexed the same way using the same embeddings provider, but it's just a table. You could think of it that way. So the way that it works is we would create a folder in this staging S3 bucket, drop Parquet files into it that all conform to the same format, and then the Lambda function here, this AWS ETL Lambda function, is going to look in Weaviate and see if that schema already exists. It doesn't have to do any inference of schema here because the schema is embedded in the footer of the Parquet file. So we just read the schema that was already created and already stored in that Parquet file. We convert it into a Weaviate schema, and then if it's there, then we don't have to do anything. If it's not there, then we would create that schema, and then we can index all of the content into it. There's a couple different ways that we can index too. Travis was mentioning different modules and kind of open sourced add-ons to Weaviate as a solution that are available out in marketplaces and third-party solutions and whatnot. It's a very pluggable architecture. One of the reasons we really like it. Some of those add-ons that can be added to a Weaviate cluster would be the ability to call the embeddings provider on your behalf. So we don't see that here. In this case, our architecture currently, since we're leveraging Bedrock, is calling out to the Titan text embeddings directly. So for each row in that Parquet file, we're going out, we're generating the embeddings, and then we're doing an index embeddings call into the WeVA cluster. But WeVA also has the ability to call out to a growing list of embeddings model providers to generate those vectors, those embeddings for you. So that removes the amount of integration work that we have to do. It simplifies the overall architecture. They're doing heavy lifting that we would have otherwise had to do ourselves.
One of the cool things too about it is we run into a lot of people today who tried something on OpenAI. They just did, right? Totally normal, by the way, like we did it, right? And they realized that they don't want to work in multiple cloud vendors, or they want to have access to a wider array of models, not just OpenAI models, which I think is also fair. And what's nice about WeVA and the way you've architected this is that if the customer's already leveraging OpenAI in some capacity, WeVA already has plugins to be able to pivot them really quickly back to a Bedrock model vendor like a Cohere, right, as an example, or an Anthropic, so it makes it really simple to take an existing architecture or use case they've already built and swap it right into this sucker as a result of it.
And that's what we've done. I mean, you see here are what I would say are preferred architecture, but we support a bunch of different embeddings providers, several different vector databases, and several different LLM model providers as well. So here you see Claude. We also have the ability to call into the Jurassic models into Titan Text LLM, as well as calling into Cohere, all through Bedrock. Through the solution that we have. So it's all configuration driven. So part of the journey of figuring out, your prompt engineering, your prompt tuning, and ultimately what the best models are going to be is evaluating some of those. And this solution is meant to be a way that you can go about easily evaluating different model providers, both on the embedding side, and that can matter. For example, we have customers that want to do medical coding embeddings, and Titan Text Embeddings does a fine job at that, but there are certain scenarios where Titan Text Embeddings isn't going to know some specific medical terminology, in which case we might want to get a different embeddings provider involved, such as an embeddings model that is specifically trained for providing semantics around a medical context and has knowledge of all of those various terms that probably wouldn't be in the common nomenclature.
So go unpack there.
Quick question for you guys real quick. So look at this, let's say, for example, right, the amount of data that flows into the system keeps growing. How does kind of Tailwinds handle scalability and performance issues, right? Right, if the data keeps coming into your system keeps growing, right, and the AI requirements keep growing. So like, how do you guys handle scalability and performance issues?
Well,
yeah. So go ahead, Mike.
No, you got it.
Okay. I'll maybe answer that with several parts. So looking at the architecture and the serverless technologies that we've chosen, for all intents and purposes, for what we expect Tailwinds to be able to provide from a scalability standpoint, this covers all the bases. Lambda and API Gateway and S3, they're all going to scale horizontally for us as we need them to. The WeVA cluster running on EKS, that's also a horizontally scalable solution. So you can scale up the number of nodes in your node group on the WeVA cluster, and then ultimately add more pods, add more WeVA capacity in order to handle those scale needs. Bedrock itself, again, it's a managed service, so that's something that scales as well. So really,
okay, I'm going to let Mohamed answer the Bedrock scaling one.
Sure.
That's fine. It's fine. I'm just poking.
But yeah, soup to nuts, top to bottom. This entire architecture was meant to be both scalable as well as, like we talked about earlier, minimizing those costs. So the WeVA cluster, for example, our default is to deploy just 2 nodes. So we're running on 2 nodes for high availability and everything, but it's a pretty minimal footprint. As the customer's needs grow, they can increase the number of nodes, and the cost would scale correspondingly.
We're seeing a ton of use cases for this, so maybe it's worth like describing that from the perspective of why this matters, right? In certain scenarios. I'll give you a really good example, I think. Literally last night, it was 10 Eastern. I had a sales guy from our team call me up. He goes, "Hey, he's West Coast, right? So he calls me and goes, "Hey, I've got this interesting prospect, and they are trying to essentially they do surveys, and they have people who literally an army of people, and all they do all day is they take a survey in and they read it and then they code it, and there's like 1,000 codes for this is a happy response, or we got to do a thing, or and there's like 1,000 variations that they have. There's a coding ID number for each one." And I sat there, he's describing this to me, and I say to myself, I'm at home, I have this architecture I can just deploy it really quickly for myself. It's like, I think I could do this in like half an hour. And so I stopped what I was doing, put the kids to bed, right? Came back to my computer and deployed the architecture really quickly. And it did a few things. The first was we loaded all of the codes for the reasons that a survey is a particular way, all those codes into the Weave8 vector store. Right? It took me like 5 minutes to do. And then what I did was I built a query against it. And the query leveraged Anthropic, and that's probably closer to Cohere actually when I ended with it. So it's testing different models for different use cases. But what it did was it said, here's my survey. I didn't like my ice cream, right? It didn't have enough chocolate bits in it. And that's a negative survey, right? To be clear. And so I would first ask the LLM to define its sentiment score, right? Positive, negative, neutral. Just really simple. Just what do you think it is of those three? That's one. The second thing I asked it to do was then describe why it was, positive, negative, neutral. Like give it you yourself, LLM. You describe it. Second data point. And then I attached those first two things I just added to the survey as sentiment dash description dash survey. I got one text field. And I submitted that text field to Weave8. I said, find me the codes that are most semantically similar to positive, negative, right? Commentary for these particular reasons. And here's the survey results specifically so you know in detail a particular thing you want. And give me the top 3 codes as a response. And I did that. And I got the top 3 codes. It was near perfect to what they needed on my first go. I'm like, that's good. And the second thing I did was I said, the customer requested that for each survey, there's usually a next step or thing you have to do. Like, my ice cream's bad. Like, do you want to send them a coupon? Right? Do you want to call them up? Should they come back in, return it? There's always like a thing you have to do. Right? And so they asked for, can you classify at the same time, is there an action item? Or should we not call this person? Or is there a sales opportunity to sell them more ice cream? So it's a classification of like 5 criteria. And so I put the survey in, got the classification, and I also output a Boolean, right? Should you do one of those 5 things? And I spat that out into an Excel file to give me like 50 or 60 example sets, right? And I sent them back at like, I don't know, at that time it was probably like 12:30 at night. I sent it back to them. And the next morning I got an email from them and I said, holy crap, that's exactly what I wanted. How did you get that fast, right? And reality is like we just used the same architecture again, right? And we just swapped out the business use case they may have at that point in time. And now they're really interested in moving forward with actually deploying it for the rest of the organization. So that's one. We've got literally a binder of use cases for all the customers we're helping right now. A lot of them are in healthcare specifically. So yeah. You have a question, Adrian?
No, interesting. Just kind of one of those disarming things where people think, oh, HCLS and GenAI not do thing. But if you go about it and do it right, start with security in mind, kind of build your moat in concentric circles. Ironically, something that we talked about today, security models and AI ML at an offsite I was at. The better you work to mitigate the thing, the less of a failure domain you have to worry about. So as we get to it, I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so we definitely learned from what failures and good things are, by the way, as a part of our experience. Mike and I would literally spend like nights with talking to each other, being like, that didn't work. Like, why is this thing acting the way it is? But healthcare in particular, I would say like 7 out of 10 of either customers or prospects who care a lot about GenAI are in that space. And I think it's because the result is it's a industry that's got a lot of data entry, just manual stuff you have to do, right? And everybody just wants an answer. They don't have to do it anymore. And so we're getting a lot of that type of thing. And I'll give you a few examples. We helped a company called LiveTech. What they do is they engage with claims processing on behalf of the patient. So they're a patient advocate in this scenario. And they come up against rules. There's 10 rules for Blue Cross Blue Shield and Aetna, whatever. And insurance providers are always looking for reasons they say no, right, to a claim you're going to submit to them. We have a case study on it. We're happy to share. And what we learned was, can we use an LLM like a rules or decision engine to make a decision for us, instead of what you traditionally do is you'd write by hand the different rules, you load it into a rules engine and you parse out data and compare and all that other stuff you have to do. Can we just not do that anymore? And instead just use an LLM instead. And so we took a claim and we then took 10 to 15 different rules and we spitballed right there to CEO. And we're just can we just make the LLM tell us the right answer, right? On the fly. And the short answer was yes, but it wasn't perfect. But we never thought it'd be perfect. But the answer was yes. And that led to them talking to us about, can we build a more end-to-end solution where we can essentially give their existing team a co-pilot, right? To sit there and say, hey, this claim came in, 9 out of 15 things are right. These 6 are wrong. Focus your time on the 6, not on the other 9, because they're spending their time on all 15 before then. So it's a big efficiency gain for them. And oftentimes it's reading paperwork. And I don't think a lot of people like to do that long term. And so by reducing that, it made it easier on themselves. But we treated it like a rules engine at the end of the day. We had another customer, Preverity, a healthcare company. Actually, technically speaking, they're in a vertical. They do malpractice risk analytics for hospitals, right? So they're kind of same space. They have a different problem. This one was, they have a bunch of researchers internally, and when they're looking through claims or through doctor's notes, looking for malpractice risk sort of events, right? They don't know what all these codes are that they're seeing. I had a headache, it gets coded ICD-52, whatever, right? And so people have to Google for all these things, and they're sitting with pamphlets, and they're just trying to learn and understand what this stuff is. And it takes them a lot of time to do all that research on a per claim basis. And then they have to do many of these to find trends. And that's eventually how you find risk. And so one of the things we built for them was, we took all of these different types of coding content and risk content in the same architecture, right? And then we gave their research team an interface where they said, hey, I'm looking up this thing. Go find me all the relevant material I need to do my risk analysis. Right, which for them would take them, I don't know, an hour or so to get all the content, and then they do it analysis to minutes, if not seconds, right, as a result. And they were super skeptical, to be honest with you, when we started the process. And we built it on a really janky front end at first, just to kind of give you a place to go poke around and try it. And they loved it so much that they're now rolling out the rest of their organization. At one point, they even had the CEO of their company had a Python script that they had to execute to turn on a radio application. That's how far they went just to try something. But it turned out to be super cool for them at the end of the day. We're working also, I'll talk about this one, I swear, with a law firm startup. And what they're doing is they're doing not claims processing. They're doing, what's the word? Class action lawsuit analysis, right? And really for them, we're treating an LLM like an ETL engine at the end of the day. And I used to be a DBA a long time ago. And one thing I always hated was massaging data and having a pipeline and then it breaking and I have to go back in there and fix the pipeline. So one of the cool things we did was we defined what the input to our system looked like, the target location. And we said, it looks like X. And then we said, the source, where it's coming from, looks like Y, and they do not match. LLM, make it match, right? And it spits it out in a reformatted output, right? That matches expectations for what the internal system is going to take. So now, there's obviously some tuning there you have to do to make the right prompt and to massage the data, but there is no data pipeline required, right, for that scenario. And they can just now they can consume data from many different types of documents and integration providers and not care about all the different pipeline stuff they typically would have to do.
That's awesome. I had a question, just referring back to the architecture diagram. But yeah, a little late on this one. But how long is the intake output process? How long does it take from beginning to end?
The whole project, or just the data ingest?
Yeah, so like the data ingestion to output.
I don't know. The
So
data is
to
pretty quick, right, Mike?
yeah, I'm going to throw an asterisk on this because it depends on how much data you're dropping in there, obviously. But let's say we drop a file in there that has a few thousand records. I would expect that to have that indexed and available to search and RAG against, if we can use RAG as a verb, that would be like seconds to minutes. I can give you an example in preparing. We have a little demo that we're going to show off in a little bit. To prepare for that, I dropped a file that had, I think it was, I don't know, a few thousand records in it. I dropped it all the way upstream when we were talking about that data lake. This was a CSV file, so I dropped it in the bucket that would then consume it and convert that into Parquet, and then that kicked off this ETL process. Data was available as soon as I could refresh the tabs. So, the first bit of data is going to start streaming through very quickly, within seconds, and for all of that data to be processed, less than a minute.
Awesome.
Well, damn.
Yeah, that's impressive.
What else do you guys want to know? Open book, for the most part.
Careful with it. I got some pokey.
Within reason.
Can we talk a little bit about security and compliance? I know a lot of customers do have some concerns about that. So kind of like a general stance on security and compliance.
Yeah, I think given that so many of our customers are in the healthcare space, we run into a lot of like PII questions, to be honest with you. And there's obviously a leg up here for Bedrock in particular, but I think the biggest thing customers care about is they want their data going somewhere, like X, right? And so when OpenAI came into the market, right, in particular, and people said, oh, I have to integrate with an ISV that's super young and there's a lot of potential, but it's risky, right? And for a long time, they would train on your data, right? Whether you use it or not. It made people nervous. And so what's nice about Bedrock in particular is the way I think about it, right, is when you sign up for Bedrock, they do like a hidden VPC peer behind the scenes, right? And they just give you access to a model API endpoint. That's how I think of it, right? And what it means is all your data always transfers over to the Amazon backbone, and it never goes out to the public internets. And Amazon has to maintain the security credentials that they're advertising to all their customers, right? And right, here's an example, right? And the reality is then for all these health companies or fintechs we're working with now, it means they can feel a lot more comfortable with where their data is going, especially if they're already existing Amazon partners, right? To them, it's just like you turn on a switch and then you just get to do a thing. It helps that there's Anthropic in particular, for example, is a HIPAA approved company, compliance company already. And probably more importantly, though, the way these models are built, everybody's trained models in different ways, trying to find the best way, right? That's the race. Anthropic's motion was, hey, we're going to really curate the kind of information that goes into the model so that there's the lowest likelihood possible of nefarious content that comes out of it. That's like their shtick, right? If you go on their website, you'll find that shtick on there. And what it means is for healthcare use cases in particular, it's a really low probability that, sure, maybe, I'm not going to say something can't ever be wrong, but there's a difference between wrong, factually incorrect, and negative nefarious, right? And you're guaranteed it won't be negative nefarious. Everything's on your part, right? Figuring out the right prompt or right data you're putting into it. A lot of open source models today, for example, do not make that guarantee. right? They're more free speechy, and you can make them do some creative things, right? Same thing with OpenAI. You can make it do some creative things that are not so good. And so that's really positive, a really easy discussion with a customer who cares about how data is used and where it goes and that type of thing.
Yeah, I think you may have nailed the overall essence of what we're talking about at this point. Squarely on the head, Mohamed, and then certainly Travis in your explanation of that. And I think all of us that have been around for a while, we know we could say the world about, yeah, we've done this, and here's the type of problems we've done. It was pretty cool. But every single customer is going to want to understand, has somebody else done it before? They rarely want to be the first. They always feel that trepidation mitigated. Additionally, if somebody's done it before and they can refer to it and hand something to a CEO and say, hey, look, we did our due diligence. We're not going to be the pioneers here. Somebody's already done it. We've proven that it succeeded. Is there anything you want to tell us about these two reference customers?
Yeah, I mean, they had failures, right? And I think the overarching theme we learned, Mike and I had a very long conversation on this topic, was when we started fiddling with this tech, we thought we could always get the right answer. And the reality is that's wrong. That's a wrong thought process, right? We should be shooting for the best accuracy that a model can output. It will never be 100%. You can get pretty close with fine tuning and making custom models and blah, blah, but it'll never be 100%. And what we learned really quickly is that we should, one, set expectations. We should, two, make sure that when something is wrong, it doesn't say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. It instead sequesters the wrong thing and lets a human make a decision instead, right? And also, it's an opportunity, I think, to engage with a company or customer to say, you know what, maybe this is an opportunity to fine tune this thing. The general process Mike and I do, we start from RAG, right? We prompt engineer with data to get it to 90, 95%. That's like the goal. And if a customer wants us to get to 97, 98, 99, never 100, then we say, okay, what are the missing pieces we need to fine tune it and to make it better, right? And that's the expectation things we have up front with a lot of people. And we learned that the hard way, right? We said, oh, this would be perfect. We came in, it's not perfect. And then we had to walk it back a little bit. But the customer was happy because net new tech, no one knows the right answer yet.
Yeah, and I guess the cool thing overall here is, despite the skin knees and the lessons learned along the way, proud to say that through our collaboration, the overall Better Together story, these are among the first running on production AWS Bedrock customer references and case studies. And that's something that I think is going to be largely beneficial to customers that are starting to explore this space, including a question that was asked in the chat by Chowmeister. They'd like to hear AWS's perspective about, with no knowledge of AI, how can I know where to put AI into my overall architecture? Thereabouts, even though I now kind of butchered it. But yeah, being able to show the roadmap has been done before is largely it's confidence building. So I'd like to turn it on David and Mo. Jens, where do you think that one should inject AI into their overall architecture and workflow?
Yeah, so I would say, as far as injecting AI into your overall infrastructure, that is not necessarily an answer that I could give definitively. I'd have to say it depends, right? But without super deep knowledge of AI right now, I'm still learning it myself. So I would certainly recommend just going to the various different sources of training that we have. There's a whole world of content that we have out there to learn how to do so many things. So that's not necessarily an answer that I can give on the fly, but the answer is out there. It's, like one of my favorite shows in the 90s, The Truth Is Out There.
I would say, unless Mo, you have a thought, sorry.
No, you can go ahead. You can go ahead.
When we talk to customers about how they would integrate AI the very first time, we outright tell them, let's not go crazy, right? A lot of times people come to us and say, hey, I need to train a model. the guy last night who sent me his thing said first thing on his email was, I have a lot of data to train a model. That's complicated, right, to start from. I think the real answer is when you look at your systems and how they're integrated, think about how, for example, how data is being processed from point A to point B, right? Are there pieces of that process that are cumbersome or really meaty and I think annoying, right? And can you have an AI system just solve for that, right? And you treat the AI system like a function of code, and you say, here's my data, make it better, cleaner, different, right? And you just get an out. You don't treat it like an AI. You treat it like a helper function, right? In a pipeline or in a process. I think that's a really easy way to integrate to get some value out of it without having to think about all the other bits that come, but there's no RAG that's involved, and that motion is probably a little bit, but there's not like a ton. The other sort of motion we're seeing a lot now is on search, quite frankly. A lot of people come to us and they say, hey, I want AI to do a thing. And they explain their use case to us. And our answer is like, you actually don't want AI. You actually just want vector search. All right, over here. And they just assume those two things are very similar, if not the same thing in many cases. So a good example of this would be looking up documentation, right? Knowledge-based documentation or a search bar in a website, right? You want to find content in. And when people type into your favorite knowledge base, you probably get links to a bunch of pages. You don't know why those pages matter or what's in them. You click around so you find the right answer. I think is a terrible experience. What a lot of people are doing now with semantic search is they're taking in all those documentations. You type again into the search bar, and it finds you the specific passage of the thing you want. Way more helpful, right? And that's simpler to integrate, right, from an infrastructure perspective than trying to build a model from scratch.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I real quick, I just wanted to throw it out there for anyone that's just now tuning in. Welcome to Howdy Partner, our weekly series on Twitch, where we bring AWS partners on to show their solutions to you guys. Today, we're talking to our friend Adrian SanMiguel with AWS, and also with Travis and Michael from Innovative Solutions. They're talking about their Tailwinds platform right now. So welcome.
And I can jump in and kind of add my flavor to what Travis had said. So obviously looking for an area where generative AI can actually solve the problem. That's first and foremost, right? Then looking for opportunities where there are manual processes, but the only reason there's a manual process, why there's a human required, is because there's some either natural language comprehension required, or you need to produce natural language. So both of those are situations where a large language model is going to excel. Situations where, we talked about accuracy. Travis brought that up earlier. If there's a situation where you can have a human review something that's been pre-populated by an LLM. An example would be if you're generating content, maybe generating marketing emails, and you have a pipeline where someone can look at the email that's generated and send it out. It's a great opportunity to reduce all of the human need to generate that copy and trim that down to a sliver of what it was by just being a reviewer. We've had customers come to us that they have intake processes that require their customers to fill out forms. And those forms could probably be figured out using a large language model and analyzing content that's already available. So in that situation, you can pre-populate it and then have the customer verify that the data in there is accurate. So situations like that are great opportunities for an LLM and generative AI to be slated into an existing architecture. And then also situations where latency is less critical. Depending on the model that we're using, sometimes there are latency considerations, I would call them. Some of the models, it's going to take, depending on the amount of content that you're processing, seconds to process. That's not an unrealistic expectation at this point in time. Some of the models, like some of the instant and turbo models, they can return things much faster. But I think our general expectation, if you're using the latest models, the latest generation of models, they don't have instant versions for all of those yet. So you should expect a second or two of latency. So if you have workloads that are less critical, if it's a background asynchronous process, things along those lines, those are great opportunities, again, to slot in generative AI.
I think that's pretty spot on overall. And there was a question that was asked in the chat by looking for the user Chatmeister again. Continuing on with that conversation, we talked about a couple things of look for what makes sense for you. Travis made mention of treat it less as a cure-all and specifically a tool in the toolbox that you can use to specifically work and diagnose your problem more effectively. And my particular take on that is kind of the next step on that. Identify what is actually core to your business as far as the problem is and what you want to get out of it. It's cool that you have a lot of data and you say, I want to do something better. I want to do it better. But in the early days when Travis and I first started talking about Tailwinds in the code name, which is escaping me at the moment, there was a general contractor that was confronted with the problem saying, hey, labor costs are going through the roof. It costs me more to pay people. People sitting idle cost me a ton of money. When we get figured out, try to sketch out plans. And they came to him with the problems that ultimately, yes, our labor costs are super high. But with all of the docs that I have, all of our architectures, all of our schematics, all of our plans that we've ever done, is it possible for you to make general guidance for us to figure out a preferred order or a set of recommendations, or just in broad strokes, the best way possible to do window and door installs so that I can save some money at the end of the week on labor costs? And just like what we walked through with the architecture diagram, we fed in the information in a Parquet file, everything got munched and spit out. And at the end of the day, this general contractor had a pretty prescriptive set of steps to fix step one of all of that. If you follow this workflow in about this order, you're going to save ballpark X number of hours a week, specifically on labor, if you go about this. And of course, mileage may vary as you go, but most importantly, here's how we can start taking steps at this. First, it starts with windows and doors, and then, hey, are we supposed to be starting from the back of the structure working up, or back of the structure working forward, and then move up to the next floor, et cetera, et cetera. So as you begin almost reverse peeling back the onion in that regard, as you start focusing on hyper-specific issues that you're having in the grand scheme of the problem, it becomes very easy to start hopping onto the next thing once you have informed bits of data that you can use to either prove or disprove what you're working on next as the most important thing to the business. And someone else had asked, what was the name of that user? Two-door H about SEO. Hey, everybody's talking about SEO. Okay, cool. But in the grand scheme of things, what specifically in SEO actually matters? Like, what to your business is it? Are the recommendations off? Did Adrian go through and fat finger something when I was trying to do a quickie Google search, pull up a meme? Correct the spelling, and they say, hey, this is probably what you want. Ultimately, as you start distilling that down, you get hyper specific and you get very pragmatic on what you're going to focus on versus trying to boil the ocean. Travis, curious on your thoughts on that. Does that make sense, or am I completely out of left field?
No, I think you're right that you got to start small and you'll figure it out and you make it repeatable, right, from that point forward. On the SEO question in particular, the nuance is, for anybody who's done SEO before, it's really annoying. It's time consuming, right? You're like, you have to tag every image with like a few words because search engines pick them up. You got to make sure you use the right words inside of a description or otherwise, and it's just a big hassle. But you do it because you want to rank higher in Google at the end of the day. And what LLMs can let you do is, let's say you're writing a blog article, right? And you insert that blog article in and you say, pull out the keywords because those are the keywords you want to leverage in your SEO. Or you say, here's my blog article, pull out the keywords most specifically related to this target audience. I'm making it up, right? And it gives you that set of content that you can just copy paste and shove it into an SEO system of some kind. Make it way easier to do that. I think a lot of what you're seeing in the market, people saying, it's a lot of work to do. I think there's a lot of small businesses, like really small businesses, who are unoptimized And it's a really good side hustle to kind of go in real quick and say, hey, I'm going to rank you higher in Google over your competitors, right? And you come in, you do some SEO work, you get out because you use an LM at the end of the day to help you do it. So there's a lot of that we're seeing in the market today.
Honestly and candidly, as a former admin of the lonely handful of clusters that we built off of the Google search box, if anybody's old enough to remember that, it was great to implement, but once we realized search was horrid and SEO was terrible, to figure out what people cared about so we can do more of the thing, it became almost a battle of contrition, where it's like after we optimized, it was a non-ending flywheel. So approaching in the way that you're talking about, it's a bore, it's a chore. If you could find a way to shortcut it and focus all that time, in AWS, we generally use the term undifferentiated heavy lifting. If you could drop that lifting and have the one or two persons that are managing this full time at a small to medium business, that's huge. That's huge on revenue impact. That's hours of overtime not consumed, and that frees them up to do the more important things that are even more of a pressing need. Or if we only had that extra bit of bandwidth or an extra head, we can go do X, Y, Z. Now you shipped off the grunt work effectively to something else that's more intelligent, more capable, and far more sophisticated than what you can figure out.
I'll give you a good example. What year is this? 23. In 2021, right? I have my own startup at one point. It's called Hype Equity. You can Google it. Someone else owns it now, right? But the website's still up. And really quickly, what it did was it ingested social media data, Reddit data specifically, and it trended social interactions around businesses compared to their stock price. And it did it in real time, right? And it was at the height. I made it like 2 months before GameStop exploded, right? Because I lucked out right at that timing. But the idea was taking all this data, and then you can analyze the data. You can find trend lines in the data. More importantly, you get alerted when a new trend is forming, and you could make money off a trade. That was like the goal. Now, on the SEO side, the thing I hated, every morning I had to get up at 5 a.m. I had to look at every single new trend that was forming, and I had to write blog posts or content every single morning for like a year to then create content that I will give to a journalist, or I'd post it on Reddit for someone to see, or I'd write a blog post and have to make every morning at 5 a.m. I'd go do that. If I had an LM now, I would have slept so much better back then, because I can just put my data into it and it's like, give me my thing, please. Right. And it's there for me. So there's a lot of opportunity like that, even within businesses today that they're running into, where they have all this content that they're requiring people to format, right, in some capacity. And it's tedious, boring stuff that an LM can do in your place.
Awesome. So this has been really informative, good conversation, a lot of awesome questions answered. I'm excited to see it. Do we have a demo?
Yeah, we got like 12 demos.
Yeah, I can jump over the demo. Before we leave this side, I just wanted to circle back to the security question. So obviously we talked about like compliance, and we're dealing with customers in the medical space, and we want to make sure that all the services we're using are HIPAA compliant and whatnot. But from an infrastructure perspective, making sure that everything is secure, we had customers come to us and say, hey, you're exposing this via API gateway. Yeah, we can make a private API gateway, but that's not something that we want to have to deal with. What are our other options? So this is what we implemented for LiveTech. This is an alternative integration method where we're leveraging request and response SQS queues rather than an API gateway to handle the requests coming in on the prompting side. So using VPC endpoints, this is secured, so it's always staying on the AWS backbone. That was critical to them, because if they have any data, even if it's not sensitive data that needs to go out onto the public internet, then they have to go through compliance audits and all these other compliance related hurdles that they have to jump over. So we developed this in such a way that they don't have to do that. So just wanted to kind of put a bow on the security question there. So for a demo, going back to our Tailwinds architecture, so we have a method to ingest data into our vector database, and then we've exposed an API that calls a Lambda function, performs a semantic search against that vector database, and then calls Bedrock and Claude within Bedrock to execute a prompt augmented with the data pulled from the semantic search. and then returns the results. So that's kind of just a quick refresher on the flow here. What that actually looks like, this is a little tool that we've created using Gradio, which if you're not familiar with it, it's a UI toolkit to help build ML-based UIs that are super quick to put together. This is not a ton of code that we had to implement in order to create this user interface. This is sitting on top of that API that we were looking at down here. So on the back end, there's a little Python server that's running, and it's going to make HTTP calls or HTTPS calls into that API gateway, and then execute the Tailwinds backend searching solution. So first thing we need to do is we need to select one of the knowledge domains that we've indexed. So earlier I was talking about the folders that we're then turning into domains or tables within the Weaviate cluster. That's what you see here. Each of these are tables that have their own schema. So you can see we have product data, cache results data, hurricane data, user data, job descriptions, restaurant reviews. I have a couple things that I want to poke at here. I'm going to start with hurricanes. So what's something that I could ask of hurricane data? So this is like 10 years of hurricane data throughout the entire globe, breaking it down month by month. So I could ask how many hurricanes were there in 2012? And hope that the live demo gods smile upon us.
It's a little risky.
Fingers crossed.
As it's running, one of the use cases here, by the way, we're getting a lot nowadays is data analytics. Right? Is being able to pull consumption content in some kind and then give them an answer.
And that was what, 5 seconds max, if that?
Yeah, something like that. And we're probably dealing with a little Lambda cold start time in there and all that. So if we run it again, it's probably going to be a little bit faster than that. But that's what I was talking about. This is going against Claude 2. So we have the transit time for API gateway to Lambda. We had the Lambda cold start time, which can be overcome with provision concurrency. We have the initialization of the clients and everything. We have the query against Weaviate, the generation of the augmented prompt, and then the execution of Claude 2 via Bedrock, and then returning the response. So all of that is happening once things are warmed up in just a couple of seconds here.
And Claude 2 probably takes the longest, right? That's a big part of the model selection process is sometimes customers just want the fastest answer, right? Even if it's like not the most sophisticated response, it does need like all the nouns and adjectives to make it sound pretty. That it's like, what's my answer, right? In that scenario, you can use a model that's super fast but not creative, as an example. Whereas Claude 2 is super creative and it's better at reasoning, better at more complex tasks, and takes longer to run.
Yep. So you see here we have a bunch of different options that we can pass in to our API as well. So you can tell the LLM, you can tell Claude 2 to be impersonating as a specific persona. By default, we're performing the semantic search against the prompt that gets passed in, but you can imagine if you have a complicated prompt, there may be words in there that have nothing to do with what you want your semantic search to be doing. So you can break that out and specifically search for specific terms. You can break it up into multiple searches with delimiters. You can give a description of the data that you're augmenting that can help Claude 2 or whatever LLM this is targeting perform, basically understand the data that it's dealing with better. And then there are processing instructions. We've got a few other things for diagnostics and some tweaks to things like temperature on the back end, which controls the creativity level. Hallucination protection drops down the temperature as low as it will go, which means we're going to be as literal as possible. Turning off hallucination protection will bump up the temperature and make Claude 2 behave a little bit more creatively, as well as outputting diagnostics. So timing information, the prompt, the augmented prompt that was actually executed against the LLM, as well as the shot size. So if you're not familiar with that, a shot in this context is really the number of results that we're getting back from our semantic search that we want to augment our prompt with. So right now we're taking 3 results from our hurricane database, our hurricane class table, and we're adding those, we're augmenting those to our prompt. We can bump this up I think there are about 10 examples in this particular database. And it'll take a little bit longer because there's a little bit more data to deal with. But now you can see we added an additional hurricane by incorporating more supplemental data. We're able to add more context, more information to the prompt that we're executing. So it's going to give a more accurate result in this example. An example of what we might
wait. There's questions.
Yeah.
There's questions.
Yeah. Go
I was
ahead.
about to say. So what happens if you throw it a curveball and don't ask anything about hurricane?
Yeah, let's try to break it. Let's break the sucker.
Yeah.
If we want to break it, okay.
Ask
What
it
do we
about.
want to ask it?
I don't know, Samuel Adams. How many Samuel Adams beer was there in Florida? I'm making it up. I don't know. Put it where you want.
Well, the answer was lots because nobody drinks it outside of New England.
Ah,
I digress.
I would expect that it's going to say it doesn't have the information to be able to answer that.
I lied.
Look at that. 19 beers. Now, that's about accurate. That might be the all-up answer.
Yeah, so in this case, we're not telling it specifically that it's looking at hurricane data because we haven't provided an augmentation description. So it's looking at the hurricane numbers, which are just numbers, and it's saying, oh, well, you're asking about beers. These must be beers. So I think the lesson to take away from that is the inputs to the prompts are definitely important. It is sometimes a very literal thing and doesn't understand maybe context that a human would have understood, would have been able to say, I don't know what the answer to that question is because I don't know anything about beers here.
Mm-hmm. Would it be possible to toggle off hallucination protection, double down on that semantic search and say, look, no, for real, I really don't want you to tell me hurricanes. Is that going to change the end result? Is that going to directly manipulate how this goes through into the vector database? Is this going to influence the way that the output is generated?
Yeah, so hallucination protection isn't going to change the semantic search at all.
Okay.
That's not anything that we've implemented. It's really focused on the LLM and the interaction with the LLM, both via the parameters. So temperature, top P and top K, dialing those down so it's as literal as possible, as well as some additional processing instructions to tell it to ignore any previous knowledge, for example, and only use the augmented data that we're providing it. Also adds an instruction to say, hey, if you don't know, if you're not confident about this answer, then you should tell me I don't know.
Can we get to the I don't know? Is that something that we can run through pretty quick?
Sure. Let's see.
While he's typing that, one of the interesting things we hear a lot from customers is how do you make it not hallucinate, right? And one of the simple things you can literally do is just give it an out, right? You give it an out at the end of the day. You say, if you don't really have an idea what the answer is, just don't try to fake it, right? You just say, I don't know the answer, right? And in more cases than not, you can convert that into like a null if it's being integrated into a system, right? Or into a retry mechanism, right? Because like I said, it's not 100% every single time. So if it fails, can you retry it and do it again until you get a good answer? There you go.
There we go. And so I suppose it'd be as easily as toggling that on or setting your params up front so that you can have higher quality, higher accuracy of output so that you can kind of mitigate the, hey, I'm just going to go ask some random thing and potentially take this out and put it into like a QBR doc and say, hey, look, I asked the big model, I asked the genie, and this is what came out, so it's definitive. So this is kind of a way to hedge, as you mentioned, the out, to say, hey, look, I don't know anything about this, so I'm going to have to tell you up front.
Yeah, really, this is a prompt engineering tool, right? So this can be an interface that maybe a back-end ops person is using to interact with the system. But ultimately, I think we would all agree that we don't expect someone on an operations team to know what all of these things are. So this is a tool for a developer, an engineer, an architect to go out and figure out what the best prompts are and come up with the parameters that can then be integrated into a system. Maybe it's another interface that's similar to this. We've done that for some customers. They wanted to hand an interface like this to their their back ops folks, but this is too complicated. It's too technical. So We did our prompt engineering. We figured out what the ideal parameters were, and then we built another stripped down application that takes all of this out. They don't have to select the domain. Basically, they just put a prompt in. They say, how many beers were there in Florida in 2012? They click the submit button, and it's going to give them the answer with all of this stuff already figured out for them.
But there's other questions, and we can show you a second demo because we have many demos. So yeah.
Before we get there, I just want to add that I threw our survey link in the chat. So if you guys would please take our survey, tell us how we're doing, if you learned anything, if you want to see more of Adrian on the show, let us know how we're doing and what you like and what you don't. So if you could please do that for us, I'd appreciate it.
Mike's trying a different variation. And Mike, I was thinking we should show the Tailwinds GUI, right, for search.
Yeah, I'll pull that up in just a second. I did want to show maybe more about the semantic search before we go over there. So here we're just saying summarize the product reviews. We're performing a semantic search on product reviews. We have a table that has product reviews in it. It's going to pull some back, and then it's going to provide a summarization here. So you can see there's positive reviews, there's negative reviews. It's kind of a hodgepodge of different types of reviews that are being returned here. If we wanted to focus on summarizing just the positive reviews, we can provide literally the word positive as the semantic search term, and then the Weaviate cluster, it's going to search for reviews that have a positive sentiment. So we can do that, and I would expect we're going to get back a summary of more positive reviews here.
See? Hallucination protection.
Live demo.
Holy crap. There we go.
There's other questions around, I think it's related. There's a question around data, right? One of the big asks we get is around data analytics. Tell me my forecast from January to February. I'm making it up, right? Learnings, really quickly. LLMs, all of them suck at math. They're horrible at math. They're like, it's got like a 40% win rate on math. And it's really hard to compare mathematics to say, was it right or wrong? And so you're spinning the wheel every single time. And one of the ways you get around that is with what's called an agent tool. And think of it like an API. You're going to make a little script off to the side, exposed on an API endpoint, and it goes off and does math for you, right? And the way you interact with it is you ask an LLM, hey, my forecast from January to February, and it makes a query. It formats a SQL query or otherwise, and it submits the query to the tool, and the tool does the math for you, and it spits back your answer is 50 grand or whatever, right? And the LLM says, oh, your forecast is $50,000, right? And that's one of the cheeky ways you kind of get around that problem. And there's lots of tools being built like that for things like web search, right? LLMs don't have access to the public internet, so you give it a tool to do so. When you look at ChatGPT does this as well, right? That's the plugins. Those are all tools, right? They all go off and go do something for you on your behalf. Companies can make their own tools for their own systems and have an LLM interact with it to go do a thing. But math is bad. I don't trust it.
So here you can see searching for positive results. We get a bunch of 5-star reviews.
Okay.
And then if we search for negative results, I would expect we see some 1 stars here. And then we'll there we go, to negative 1-star reviews, 1-star reviews. So
negative 1 star or negative, 1 star? Because I was about to say
negative, 1 star.
Okay, if you unlock
that'd be pretty bad if it was negative stars.
I want to hear about that because I've had a couple of those lately.
Yeah,
I won't say who, but yeah, they were pretty atrocious.
Yeah. So Travis, you wanted to bring up this?
Yeah. So this is a tool we made for tech demos when we're out in the field. A lot of customers come into us and they're like, what can I do with AI? And we talk about things like search document search, product reviews, things around, I want to go find content that's related to a thing. This is what this describes. So this is a front end that we built in partnership with Weaviate, right? So they're the store company that we're working with. And what it does is you come in and you say, maybe you're looking for healthcare products, vitamins, supplements, whatever, right? They're all typically healthcare products. And you come in, you're in CVS.com or whatever, and you type in, I need help with going to sleep, right? That's just what you type in. And what this does is first, it semantically goes off and finds all the products based off of the product reviews that showcase, hey, I need help sleeping. And it stack ranks them based off of the probability that this one's the one that's probably going to help the most. That's one. The second thing it does is it creates custom messaging. So at the top, it's a summary. It's a summary of the products found compared to the inquiry you're asking of it. And then each of those product summaries below them are literally like, oh, this product, here's a description of the product in relation to the query you just asked of it. So now it's relevant to you, right, as to why you should buy that particular item. And if you click one of these things, Mike, you'll see some more stuff that I think is just a little neat. So on the left-hand side here as well, all of this information is being stored in the vector search, right? So this is also metadata associated to a product or claim or item. It's not just text. It can be lots of different pieces of information that are interrelated to each other. So in this case, it's going to be the actual ingredients of the products. It's going to be the litany of reviews the product has received, right? The score on a 1 to 5 scale of how well it did, right? As an example. And then we highlight, pieces of information here that I think are relevant for people to see so we understand what's being picked up on, right? When you type in, I need help sleeping as a result. So this is a demo, right? We like to show to people. It's built on the exact same architecture once again, right? Like I said, when we first started the conversation, 80% of use cases, right? Same thing. Once again, right? To solve that problem.
I can say I personally have used that. When you said it to me the other day, I was like, all right, let's give this a spin. I'm like, hey, my stomach hurts and my head hurts a little bit. What you got? What do?
Did you buy something?
I did. I went to my local.
Did you really?
Yeah, I went to my.
I wouldn't have done that.
Not off of this website.
Okay.
A little slightly more intelligent than that. Give me some credit, man.
Okay.
I took the recommendations and walked over to the drugstore. It's like right around the corner from my house, and looked at some options and talked to the pharmacist and say, hey, this is what I'm kind of looking at. What do you think? And so, yeah, actually, this will probably work for you decently. And sure enough, it did. So I can at least say, in my personal experience, I found this useful because I was having a problem and I didn't just want to go run and grab a swig of bottle of Pepto. That was going to make me feel pretty horrid for the rest of the day.
Yeah. Mike, I think there's a question in chat around infrastructure as code. Most of this is built on, was it Terraform and CDK? Or is it all CDK? I forget what we built it on offhand.
So this is actually CDK and SAM with a touch of CloudFormation. So the Weaviate solution is built on top of CloudFormation, so we leverage that. And then the Tailwinds itself, the out-of-the-box solution is deployed with SAM for infrastructure as code. And then we have some versions of it that leverage CDK as well.
Quick question for you, Travis.
Yeah.
Going back to data analytics, have you guys ever had a use case where you guys required the use of streaming data? Is that something that you guys used that before? Or if a customer comes and say, hey, we instead of giving you guys the data, we have streaming data. How would you go about that?
Well, to be fair, I don't think we've seen that use case. We are working with video streaming companies in particular. What I would, Mike, hold me feet to the fire here. I would assume that as data is being streamed in, probably in proportional chunks, we would then make a request to the LLM and ask itself to stream back the answer, right? And that would probably get as close as we can probably get. The chunks matter, right? Because of the context that's required to answer the question, right? So you can't just stream bytes or a particular one-off words at a time. You need something boxed together to make something useful. It's one of the reasons why we're not seeing a ton of call it real-time use cases, right? We're seeing batch operation jobs. We're seeing things like asynchronous context, but rarely real-time. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's three places that takes my mind. So streaming data, the first would be indexing that, right? If that streaming data is what you want to get into your Weaviate cluster or whatever your vector database of choice is, then an ETL pipeline that maybe takes advantage of Kinesis, similar to what you would think of as like how you might integrate with Kinesis Analytics, where it's looking at windows of data. That could be a potential solution to get that into the vector database. But then on the front end, I think, which is what more of what Travis was talking about, if you have data that you need to perform operations on, LLM operations, semantic searches against, that has to be windowed in some way. So being able to take a frame of that and process it frame by frame is a solution would have to be built around that. The Tailwind solution is really meant for let's call it transactional interactions, where you're going to provide it a thing and get a response back. Now, lots of the solutions here, we take Bedrock for example, and the LLMs, they support streaming responses. So that's something that could be exposed via a webhook or something along those lines. So that would be kind of the third place that my mind goes, is getting the response back to the consumer faster, so they're not just sitting there and twiddling their thumbs waiting for a response. As soon as that first token is available, it gets pushed out to the customer so that they start getting some immediate feedback.
Awesome.
So all I heard was we have a topic for our next quarter hackathon. We're going to just try to put something together and see, but team with the best idea will get, I don't know, we'll figure out the reward. There could be some swag ball. There could be some frosty beverages and a good meal on me. We'll figure it out, but I think it does sound kind of interesting,
One of the,
putting it that way.
Adrian, on the topic of, we described Mo. I assume you asked about streaming because it's more about real time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the areas that Mike and I have been, I will call it tinkering, because it's nowhere near ready for prime time, but it's just a cool thought exercise that we've been through, is around LLMs at the edge. Right. And so oftentimes today, when you make a request, it goes to a server backend in some farm somewhere, you wait till it comes back and blah, blah, right? And it creates a lot of cycles, right? But you do it because you need the computational power. And what we're experimenting with now is, can we do things like embed really, really small models in a browser and serve it over a CDN? And when a user loads up a page, can it perform a very specific function? It's not a big model, so it can't do everything, right? A very, very, very small model of a very specific use case, right, that you're looking for a very specific output for. Could it serve a model from the browser, execute, return response in a latency time period that a customer or user is accepting of? And a good example of why this would matter is there's a lot of computational power in having to manage your own ML models. It gets very expensive. So if you can offload that to the user's computer, right, you can make things much cheaper. For things like personalizing content in some way, the user's browser probably has a lot more context of data points and content that maybe the backend server wouldn't have access to at a given time. So you can overlay those two things together to get a better answer. And quite frankly, it's a latency at the end of the day, right? You're seeing 5-6 seconds in some of these examples, right? If you're going to an e-commerce site and you're getting custom content personalized to you, you're not going to wait 5 seconds to learn about, the ice cream you want to buy, right? You want to know that minute, but maybe in your geographic location, in your neighborhood, for your ethnicity and background, you like chocolate a lot more, right? And so it can know what that information is if it sits in your browser or is closer to your locale, and it can inform and make personalized decisions on your point. I bring it up because when I think of real time, Mo, I think of getting the model as close as humanly possible to the user, and then letting it make decisions that are informed by the business ahead of time. And that's one way we're experimenting. But Mike in particular has been like heavy fiddling, trying to make this work, because it's just, like I said, a fun thought experiment. But that's where we ended up right now. It's a little hard, right? Definitely more experimental than reality.
Yeah, I'd definitely love to, after this, definitely see if I can get involved with you guys after this. This is something we can definitely experiment on and hopefully get something going. So look forward to getting involved in that.
The more the merrier, man. Let's love you at the top. We'll get this sorted out one way or another, I think.
For sure. Awesome. Yeah, do we have any other questions in the chat or?
I think we're caught up in the chat for now.
Cool.
But we love questions in the chat, so keep them coming.
I can jump in with more tech stuff here if we want to talk about the back end. I kind of showed the architecture for this a little bit. It's similar to what we saw when we were looking at the Tailwinds on ramp, but there's a slight variation, I guess I would call it. So you see the product summary that's summarizing all of the reviews and everything and the descriptions of the products here. That is actually generated via Cohere, and going back to some of those integrations that can be achieved by adding modules to Weaviate. That's one of the ones that we're taking advantage of here. So it's that hybrid generation where Weaviate itself, with instructions from the requests that we're making into it, is taking the all of those product descriptions, all of the reviews, and it's sending them to Cohere to create a summary. Now you see we're calling out to Cohere outside of the AWS ecosystem, but very shortly I expect to have some support for Weaviate to call into Bedrock directly. It's something that they're working on right now. That's why we have to rely on Cohere outside of AWS, but something that they've been actively working on for months and I expect to be rolled out pretty soon is the ability to just tell Weaviate to leverage Bedrock, and then it would be able to call into Cohere directly without, again, ever leaving the AWS ecosystem. So again, a security measure, a performance thing, and again, it's going to simplify the amount of integration work that you have to do.
You mentioned something about modules and you kind of jog something in my memory. We keep talking about Tailwinds, and holistically, the group of us have talked for quite a long time about how Tailwinds is a solution that sits within the customer's architecture. We don't like using the word ecosystem, but we use it anyways, as it's pretty apt here. It is a modular add-on, almost like an additional layer of thing that you can do in regards to art of the possible, as opposed to being the solution that's a standalone product that sits in its own account or landing zone or whatever. Is that the case with Tailwinds, what we're doing here? Or are we taking...
I think so. 9 times out of 10, it's a bolt-on. It's not the thing, right? And the easiest way I can describe that is every company that's looking at this is a company for a reason. Like they all either had or have a business that's already in flight. They've got a product that's already running. They got technology already set up, right? And they're thinking about how they can augment it with AI, not build a whole new company from scratch or build a whole new product stack. So what ends up happening is it's a bolt-on. They're trying to improve what they have today to make it better, faster, whatever, more appealing to their end users. The 1 time out of 10 that it is its own standalone thing, it's maybe like a knowledge-based chatbot. But I'll be honest with you, you don't need Tailwinds or even architecture like that for this. You can go off and buy that for like $200 a month from some ISV. And there's like 1,000 companies that'll do it for you for dirt cheap right now. And so we don't focus on it personally, just because we find it to be low value. It's super easy for people to build and to manage and maintain themselves. And it doesn't drive value. Like a company is not going to be valued more for a chatbot they have. They're going to be valued more for, can they use AI to make the product 4 times faster, or increase stickiness by 6x, or enter a new market that didn't have. Maybe they don't do translations and they need something to translate on demand dynamically for everything. The LLM is great at translations, and now they can go into a different European market or whatever, right, as a result of that. So we're seeing a lot of use cases where integration points is what Tailwinds turns out to be for a company, and they're leveraging it as a bolt-on service, to your point.
Far out. Thank you for confirming that.
So there's another question. He's live streaming. As in, I'm a website that gives info on some random game. Do you need to give the source true, or can you search by itself for events? Yeah, so I don't know. So that's from Tudor. I don't know if that's really live streaming. What you're asking for is your website, you've got a game, maybe you're watching football, right? And scores are changing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe in that scenario, a score is an additive thing. You've got a game between two different teams at whatever stadium. Like that's a fixed point in time. You know that's going to happen, right? And the score of the game is changing incrementally as the game proceeds, right? So you're actually adding to a prompt. You're not making something from scratch. You're not even streaming a prompt. You're additive to a prompt, and you're getting a new response every single time a prompt occurs. So in that scenario, you can 100% leverage an LLM for helping you do game event information, retrieving information, and analyzing an event as a result of that. Because it's not just, you're not passing in, oh, the score is 7. You're passing in the game between these two opponents at this stadium at this time with these QBs, and the game point is 7, 14, 15, right? It's incrementally giving it context.
I had a question. If I'm a customer that wants to use Tailwinds, what's the time frame like? Like about how long does it take to onboard my product to Tailwinds?
We tell customers on average end to end it's about 4 weeks. Now the asterisk there is that's under the assumption that we're gonna deploy the architecture and then train your team, maybe run a use case through it and validate it, and then we hand it to you. More times than not, we're finding is people don't want to do the integration itself themselves. Most of the time they get stuck on prompt engineering. I think Mike may have a different opinion. And they just don't want to, they either don't want to spend the time on it or they don't understand the nuance of it. It's like writing really complicated SQL queries because a particular word or a comma, or did you use a bullet point versus just a paragraph of text will dramatically change the output in some ways. It's a lot of trial and error to get it right. And people don't want to do it. So a lot of our projects turn into doing also custom work on top of that. So we say 4 weeks for we deploy the architecture, we train your team, we put a use case through it, we validate, and we hand it to you. But then it turns additive, right? If you want to do a thing for you on your behalf or make a custom or whatever.
Nice.
I think a big thing there is train you to use the thing. More and more that's becoming like, I don't even want to call it a mandate. It's just table stakes. Where if we build you a solution, the customer does not want to have to pick up the phone and say, hey, thing broke, fix. Being able to empower the customer to take ownership of the solution, get into the weeds, get familiar with the solution, start making the tweaks as you go, and keeping both sides apprised. It's huge. It's borderline liberating to be able to give a customer that level of flexibility, customization, and of course the all-up ownership in being able to take the charge and roll the die, choose your own destiny as it is, choose your adventure, and saying, all right, cool, we got the base here, and we're going to start tweaking, and we'll treat it additive, and we'll pull out things that we need to, but ultimately it's not like they're being marooned on the island and they got to call 1-800 help desk to get help because the Lambda function, the cold starts are taking too long and it's impacting the business. How do we fix this?
Look, innovative, Mike and I, our job is to make it useful to people, right? And if we give you something and hey, that's cool and shiny, and we walk away and it breaks and now you can't fix it, it's suddenly useless, right? And so we ultimately defeat the purpose. Personally, that means I wasted my own time, not just customers' time, because we spend time, right? I've got kids, I got a family, I want to spend time with them. Am I spending time with them or am I doing something for you? And if the thing I do for you turns out to be worthless for you and I, then we both wasted our time, right? And so I think the way we avoid that is first being just upfront with what failure points look like, what expectations need to be, right? It's not a magic bullet for a lot of these technologies, but also how you can be more self-service for yourself. Now, in fairness, we have our own team of prompt engineers and so forth, right? So if people need help, they can always come back to the well and we can do a thing together. But to leave people in a lurch would be both irresponsible and boring for us.
We lost you for a minute, Adrian. You okay?
You're muted now.
I think you're on mute now, Adrian.
Even better.
Somehow I hit the double mute. That's weird. Yeah, I had to hit mute because dogs were barking in the background, so I decided to save everybody's eardrums. They're not very big, but they tend to be very loud. They think they're very big.
Maybe we told people we had 12 use cases. We literally have 12. We're not obviously. I think we're gonna run out of time doing all of those. But Mike, I think we should describe some of the internal things we've done for ourselves. Because as developers or people, it's like we want our lives to be easier. It's not always about customers, and so we can describe what we've done to make our life easier. But you should know that, and everybody on the show should know that this is the type of stuff that Mike and I and our team we're probably doing between all of us between 10 to 15 prospecting calls per day right now on these things. I think I had 4 today personally. And the conversion rate is really high. Customers really want to try like a thing, right? And to give it a whirl. And part of our Tailwinds on-ramp is about, one, making it easy in the architecture, also making it easy in the contracting, and also showing value really quickly under 4 weeks. That's the name of the game for us, right? If we don't, like, we would be like any other partner if we said everything is custom, we're going to take all our time we need, right? We chose to go fast and show value first. And then if you like what you get, then maybe we'll do something else together afterwards. Mike, you want to describe? Oh, yeah. This is Diagram GPT. This is the jam. I love this.
Diagram GPT.
Yes.
So this is our Slack bot in general. This architecture is kind of showing how the flow works for a couple of the integrations that are more relevant for today's conversation. But we have our own internal Slack bot that can do all sorts of things to help simplify all of our lives. Here we're really talking about 2 things: skills lookup and diagram GPT, as Travis had mentioned. So the first thing, skills lookup, we maintain our own database in a Weaviate cluster of all of our skills, the projects that we've worked on, the people who have worked on them, and by leveraging this integration with Weaviate and OpenAI at the time, we built this back before Bedrock was even in preview. This allows us to ask via Slack questions of our own capabilities. So we can say, a prospect comes to one of our sales folks and says, can you guys do serverless? And the salesperson doesn't know, can we do serverless? In real time, they can call in a bot via Slack and say, hey, does Innovative do serverless work? It will respond, yes, Innovative does a lot of serverless work. It will have examples. It will list out the folks who have done the most serverless projects so that he may have a relationship with them. He can reach out to them and see if they can step in, help out with a call, all that kinds of stuff. And then when we go to resource a project, figuring out who the best fit would be for a project, we can leverage that tool to easily identify the folks with a particular skill set to put the right people on the right projects. Diagram GPT, I have an example of it on the next
This is the
slide,
jam.
Really,
I'm not lying.
Yeah.
This is my favorite thing.
Yeah, I really want to see it because that first thing, guys, I'm sure you agree with me, almost sounds like a more in time and better aligned version of what we have internally for Skills Builder or Skills. So yeah, I would love to see how all of this plays together because that does sound pretty cool.
Yeah.
So Diagram GPT, it's a tool that was developed by a company called Eraser.io. They had originally developed a diagramming tool that was code-driven. If you're familiar with things like Plant UML, where you can create sequence diagrams, flow diagrams, architecture diagrams, etc., all via a code syntax that makes it really easy to modify and move things around and change things. It's a very similar paradigm in that they have their own Eraser.io syntax for diagrams to create sequence diagrams, architecture diagrams, flow diagrams, et cetera, et cetera. They exposed an API, I want to say it was like 2 or 3 months ago.
No,
so
man, it was like 4 or 5 now.
Was it? Oh,
Time
man,
is passing
flying
quickly. Yeah.
Yes, it is. So we Immediately, as I think we were probably the first people using their API.
Yeah, we were.
We had a relationship that predated that. So they let us know, we got into their beta as soon as it was released, and within, I think, 2 days, we had this integration complete, where we can now, via our Slack bot, our InnoBot, we can say, create me a diagram that does these things. It calls out to Eraser's API. Eraser is then going to call out to OpenAI and ChatGPT, or it's the GPT-4 model, and it's going to, using your prompt as well as examples, so that's currently a RAG motion, it's going to generate the syntax to create a diagram. Then on the back end, they're using a headless renderer to then render that as a PNG. The bytes of the PNG get returned to our Lambda function, which then returns them to Slack, which then sends them to the user. And directly in line, right in Slack, we get a PNG returned that we can then use. It's super useful for quick things where, even while we're on a call, we want to describe the sequence of events for that we're kind of ideating on with a customer. We can evaluate that and in seconds create a diagram that we can then show to the customer and say, hey, is this what you were thinking of? And they're just like amazed that we can come up with something so quickly, when really Eraser and Diagram GPT and OpenAI are doing the heavy lifting for us.
I love this. Oh, you're gonna show a thing? Are you gonna show a thing?
Yeah. So I'm not going to show it this one live, just because I don't want to show the company Slack. But this would be what it looks like. These are literally screenshots of this within our own Slack. So we say in a bot, create a diagram sequence. So we're telling it what type of diagram we want to create. Show me the steps to authenticate with AWS Cognito using Amplify. And it thinks for, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 seconds. You get immediate feedback. That's the way it works. So if you look at this architecture diagram, there are 2 responses coming back to make sure that things didn't get lost in communication. That's kind of the Slack paradigm. Our Lambda function sends a response to Slack saying, hey, got it, I'm working on it. Then it goes out and does its work, and then it sends the full response. So that's what you see here. It's generating the sequence diagram and says, hey, if you don't hear anything in 30 seconds, something went wrong. It repeats the prompt back to us so that we make sure nothing got lost in translation. Then it goes out, does its thing, and returns the diagram in line. So right now, I especially on the architecture side, I wouldn't consider these like things that we would include as a deliverable on a project, but it is great for ideation, quick things. You want to throw something into an SOW to make sure that everybody's on the same page. You want to go through a whiteboarding session and come out of that with something that's a little bit more formalized than just scribbles on a whiteboard. Perfect for that kind of stuff.
I love it because I can have a salesperson type up a meeting they had, and it can make me a diagram that's not perfect, but it communicates to me what the customer is actually looking for as a result. Like, they don't need to know all the different services and how the things need to connect together. They can literally have, I'll give you a good example. It's another internal tool. I don't know if you have, did you have an SAGPT thing on here? Yeah, cool.
Just a little screenshot.
That's all right. So this is an internal, once again, right? We upload a transcript to it. We call it Solution Architecture GPT. A meeting we had of a customer. And it uses Anthropic behind the scenes. And what it'll do is, at first, it'll go off, do typical things, summarize meeting, blah, blah, next steps, etc. And then the fun stuff happens. It runs through a 100-page questionnaire of migration and modernization questions we would have asked a customer. And it attempts to answer the questions based off of the conversation that unfolded. And if it doesn't know the answer, it says, I don't know, right? As a result. And a salesperson can have a call then with a customer, send it in here, pop, outputs, and it gets emailed to their SA. And the SA can really quickly get up to speed on what the project is or otherwise. You can even then take that content and then you shove that into Diagram GPT, and now you've got your diagram or your flow. And now you suddenly have started all the pieces together, right? That you can present something meaningful, right, to a customer as a result. But at the end of the day, this is all AI, all RAG, all the same type of Tailwinds architecture that we've been describing and all the different use cases we've been describing today. 80% of them are the same thing. It's just a matter of your use case and how you prompt it.
Yeah, I like what you're talking about here. I think I might have to get offline later with you and learn a little bit more about this, because this is fascinating. But
yeah, I just threw something together, just a random, BS thing. Like, hey, here are all the things that I need, and it spit it out in like 10 seconds. Like, holy crap, this is like the ultimate lazy architect, lazy admin, engineer, sysops person, like guide to translate me business person, how me talk to you. This is great. Thank you. Thanks for cluing me in on that.
Yeah, super cool. Not perfect. Once again, not 100% accuracy. Close enough.
Well, it is all amazing stuff. I think we could probably go on for another hour, but I think we're at about time. So thank you so much, both Travis, Michael, Adrian. Thank you for joining us and talking about all this cool stuff, answering all these questions. It was really a pleasure to have you guys on the show today. Any final thoughts from any of you?
Any exciting plans for Tailwinds in the future? Give us a little sneak peek, or something's
I'm
coming
not
up.
gonna give it a sneak peek, but we are planning a bunch of stuff for reInvent. We've got some. The problem we have is we got too many crazy ideas. We got to figure out which one's like the useful one. Like LLMs in a browser, too crazy. Not gonna do that one right away, right? But data analytics, right? If that's a hint, we're getting more and more of those sets of requests, and we want to have the right answer.
Awesome.
What are we looking at on this slide? Is this kind of just like the NASCAR logo thing of what the average customer or AWS?
This is for if people just don't know who we are. So I guess that's what we'll leave it on from our side. We're a 30-year-old company, 30. Lots and lots of time in IT technologies across the years. We're a premier tier partner with AWS, which means we're the highest competency level you can get, right? Partnership tier you can get with Amazon. Lots of background in data analytics, AI, ML, application modernization, data management, data pipeline management. And so when GenAI came out, we're like, oh, this is a neat fit. So we do a lot. We're based out of Rochester, New York. Mike, our chief architect, I run product and engineering for Innovative. But thank you guys for having us on.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much, guys. It was a pleasure. To all the viewers out there, thanks for tuning in. Please take our survey and please tune in again next Wednesday. We're going to have Crypt on the show. Crypt with a Q, spelled QRYPT. I think it's a quantum thing. So be sure to tune in. So, thank you all.
Thanks, y'all.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.